Welcome on into the KSL Sports front page. Mitch, Harper, and Kyle Ireland. We're going to navigate through the biggest stories in the world of sports, courtesy of, well, our website over. Well, hey, hold on. I can always get mixed up here on this screen. It's always like the mirror thing where you're like, look, the biggest stories here on KSLSports.com, which, of course, you can check out on our website, as you see, and also the KSL Sports app as well. Wherever you're watching, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Thanks for stopping by and checking out this show. We'd usually run this thing about Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays 3 times a week, and we got a lot to get to, Kyle, so let's get things started. The big story, we'll start things off in the NBA. Utah Jazz released first half of the schedule for the 2020-2021 season. We got a write-up on the site, courtesy of our Jazz insider, Ben Anderson. What were some of your initial takeaways of the schedule being released for the Jazz?
Yeah, I thought that first stretch of the season, obviously you've got the matchups with the Suns and the Clippers in the preseason, but you've also got those teams in the first 5 games of the season, and you don't hit an Eastern Conference opponent until early January. And so I like that, the Jazz have some really important games off of the bat, right? So they've got to really kick things off strong to start the season. So these preseason games, no fans are going to be in attendance, but I think that these preseason games, 2 against the Suns, 1 against the Clippers, which we already knew about, are going to be really pivotal to help this team really get rolling, because they start off, they've got Blazers, Timberwolves, Thunder, Suns, and Clippers all in the first 5 games. And I think that you're going to really see in those first 5 games what type of team this Jazz team is for this season. That 7-8-man rotation is the same as it was a season ago, with the addition of Derek Favors coming in now as the backup center, going to play some 4 as well. So I would expect the Jazz to be pretty formidable against this early stretch. The Blazers, have always kind of caused Utah some problems with their guard lineup. And so that opener, it's on the road, it's in Portland. If the Jazz can get that game, I think that bodes well for them. I really am interested to see how Mike Conley is in year number 2 with the Jazz. Donovan Mitchell taking that additional step that he did in the bubble, if that continues in this regular season. And then the Timberwolves, they're not any good. And so I would expect them to be, 1-1 at least to start the season. The Thunder took a step down. The Phoenix Suns added Chris Paul. And then obviously the LA Clippers have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. So, there's some winnable games here in the first stretch for the Jazz, but then you've got some key opponents. You've got, playoff potentially, matchups against, the Trailblazers and also the Clippers, where you're going to find out how tough this Jazz team is early on.
How about this graphic that I'm showing here? It's embedded in
yeah.
our article. The Utah Jazz social team did quite a nice job with this 8-bit video game thing they got going on with the little note guide. A very nice touch, I might add, from the Utah Jazz social team as they kind of go through some of the key games in the first half of the schedule. But you can see the full roundup here on KSLSports.com and, again, the KSL Sports app to see the Jazz schedule. And it's crazy to think, but, I mean, we're about 18 days away till opening night of the NBA season. Preseason games going to be going coming up in less than 10 days. So a lot going on in the NBA already. It's basketball season, NBA season. It feels like it just ended because it just did.
Yeah.
It's a wild time, but that's 2020. And what's maybe peak 2020, Kyle, is the fact that BYU football is going to be playing tomorrow in a game that was not scheduled earlier this week. It just happened yesterday. BYU going to be taking on Coastal Carolina. We've got a ton of roundups on articles on the site right now. I mean, look at this. We got 15 different articles on BYU Coastal Carolina. We were ready to go, but the Cougars touched down in Conway, South Carolina. They're getting ready for kickoff. What do you feel about your thoughts on this matchup for BYU and their chances of coming away with this victory?
First off, I think it's awesome that BYU was able to get a game in the first place. The fact that, they've had a number of bye weeks this season. You've got, what's it been, almost a month now since they played an FBS opponent in Boise State. So it's going to be nice to see BYU back in action, just taking on a game that wasn't scheduled, like you said, earlier in the week. and they don't have to wait another week before they play San Diego State. I think it's good for them to be able to play a top 25 team as well, to try and boost that resume up, to be able to show the playoff committee, hey, we are a good team. We are worthy of a New Year's Six bowl. I'm interested to see how BYU comes out and plays, because this Coastal Carolina team could end up being BYU's best game as far as opponents are concerned on their regular season schedule. After what they did to Boise State, that game really didn't, bode that well on their resume, right? It wasn't that game. You and I talked, Mitch, about, Zach Wilson having Heisman type moments. We talked about that being the game before they played the Broncos. Hey, this is Zach Wilson's game. This is, his potentially his Heisman moment. And then the Cougars end up rolling over the Broncos. It was a beatdown. And then the committee didn't reward them for that victory. And so, because we know what the committee thinks of Coastal Carolina, at least at this point, who knows what they think of them on Tuesday of next week. But at least at this point, they think that they're a top 25 team in the country. If BYU, can come out with, I think it's important to just win the game, right? That's obviously the biggest thing. But then if they're able to win by 2 touchdowns or more, I think that could really, help launch this BYU program into, 9-10 in the rankings. And really, I think just cement them in that New Year's Six game. I told you after that, game in Provo a couple weeks ago, and we did that special edition of the front page. I said, I think BYU is a lock for the New Year's Six. And you were like, really? And now I'm looking silly, because I really did think that they were a lock for the New Year's Six. I found it hard to think that, a playoff committee would keep an undefeated BYU team out. But clearly they really just didn't respect BYU's strength of schedule. So by being able to face another ranked opponent, that's going to boost BYU's strength of schedule. And then if the Cougars can show an impressive victory on Saturday, I think that's only going to help them further in their case to be able to make a New Year's Six game.
Yeah, I also get frustrated coming into this game, which again, kickoff's going to be at 3:30. You can listen to the game on KSL News Radio beginning at pregame with high noon. Myself and Matt Baiamonte. We're going to have ESPN's Heather Dinich on the program. It's going to be a really good show leading up to kickoff between the Cougars and the Chanticleers. But I mean, the thing is with BYU and Coastal Carolina, people are like, what's the big deal about Coastal Carolina? It's Coastal Carolina. I'm thinking, folks, there's only 17 teams in college football that are viewed in higher regard right now by the playoff committee than Coastal Carolina. And one of them is going to be lining up against Coastal Carolina, that being BYU. So, I mean, there's not many more opportunities for BYU to make a clear-cut statement that's going to elevate their profile to secure a bid in a New Year's Six bowl. BYU, I love the fact that they took on this game. And honestly, guess what? This is a bigger and better game than playing Washington. Washington is a good team, not a great team. I think Coastal Carolina, you look at the stats on them, you break them down, a little bit physically undersized compared to BYU, but very balanced. And they do not beat themselves either. They're number 3 in the country in fewest penalties this season. BYU's 11th. So both teams, well-disciplined, not going to beat themselves, and at times can be explosive. Now, Coastal Carolina is very balanced. And I think if BYU can stop their ground attack and make them one-dimensional and force Grayson McCall to win it with his arm, because they want to run. They want to be able to have that balanced attack with that spread option that they have. If they can keep and check the ground attack, this could be BYU big, and that would do wonders for their profile to secure a New Year's Six. Because again, when people try to draw up a path and say, okay, if this team loses, if this team does that, no. That doesn't work here with the College Football Playoff Committee, because clearly BYU, they have to focus on themselves. Just because there's a scenario, Kyle, I think, where you could see maybe an Oklahoma State jump BYU in the rankings, because the playoff committee would say, you know what, this win over Coastal Carolina, we're going to drop them out of the top 25. And, well, BYU's resume isn't that great after all. So the thing is, BYU just got to control the controllable. They got to focus on this game, take care of business, and I think they got to win big. I think they got to win by at least 10 points, at least. I don't think you can just win by a 1 or 3. I mean, get a win, sure, keep the perfect season intact, but I think you do have to win by at least double figures if you're BYU to secure a potential at-large bid. Now, you got the other game coming up next week against San Diego State, but this is your real chance. San Diego State is good defensively, not great, though, offensively. That's been kind of the calling card for the Aztecs, but I think that this is a huge opportunity for BYU, and I love the game. I love the matchup. I just wish it was a little bit bigger television network. I think ESPN kind of a little bit underwhelming, but hey, I'm all for this, and the fact that we get some more BYU football, sign me up. Let's do this thing.
Yeah, I think that's really the only knock on this game as far as the situation that BYU's in, other than, they've got the ESPNU, they've got the short notice for the game, but the Cougars have been ready, right? Like they've been planning on trying to add a game. And so it wasn't like they were just sitting around not practicing. They were looking at multiple opponents and trying to get ready. And so when it was solidified that it was going to be Coastal, they ended up, all 110%, is all in on, playing that game. But the ESPNU thing is a little disappointing. That game should at least be on number 2, if not on full on regular ESPN. I just think that, with the fact that the game, it's going to be on game day is going to be there. Like, how do you not have that game on ESPN or ESPN2? I just think that that's just a really big mistake as far as the network is concerned. But I do think the fact of the whole Washington debacle that took place a while back now, that's all in the rearview mirror. This is giving good publicity to BYU. They've been in the forefront. I mean, last night SVP was talking about them on Sports Center and multiple hits. You've got the game is at 5:30 Eastern. It's not an 8:00 kick. And so if the playoff committee isn't watching this game, if they're asleep, they're going to bed early because of this game. That's just ridiculous, and shame on them.
Isn't that pathetic that that's kind of like a thing we wonder?
Yeah.
Did they watch the games? Like,
yeah.
Really? I mean, my 7-year-old son watches these games. Like,
yeah.
What should he have? Oh, you watched the game. You now have a chance to determine the college football playoff. Goodness gracious, I haven't missed a BYU football game since 1994. Should I suddenly rank everything in college football? You give me a break. Come on, like at a bare minimum, like at least we should know 100%. Matter of fact, like yes, they are watching the games, but you don't know though. These playoff games, they're ADs. They got a lot of stuff on their plate. They're focusing on their schools and handling their budgets and their issues with COVID-19. You just wonder, like, do they have the time to settle in and watch a BYU football game? This one, though, there should be no excuse. Like, you got to tune in, watch BYU, watch Coastal Carolina, because, hey, the Chanticleers, they got a chance, too. I think if they win this game and they upset BYU and say maybe Cincinnati loses to Tulsa, maybe the Chanticleers are the team that's going to be in the group of 5 automatic bid. So, hey, there's a lot on the line on this game, and I love the fact that both teams taking on the matchup. It was funny. I was listening to a radio interview with their head coach, Coastal Carolina. It was like, I think on Outkick the coverage or something, but he said like this is the Mormons versus the Mullets because Coastal Carolina is big on the Mullets. I'm like, all right, sign me up. Let's go. Mormons versus Mullets. I should have said Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints versus the Mullets, but that doesn't sound as catchy as Mormons versus Mullets, I guess. Hey, I digress. I'm going to enjoy the game. I know you are. Kickoff again, 3:30 kick. You can hear the game on KSL News Radio with pregame starting at noon on your legacy home of the BYU Cougars, KSL News Radio. But, Kyle, I think we got to wrap this thing up. It's a Friday. It's almost 5 o'clock. So it's time to end the work week, potentially. Anything else before we go?
No, I mean, we're going to have coverage on the KSL Sports app tomorrow. We're going to have it on KSLSports.com. Like you said, you're going to be all on Cougar Sports Saturday before the game. But I do think that, it's going to be interesting to see how this game, ends up reflecting on either of these programs, depending on who wins. I'm really interested to see what Heather Dinich has to say about this matchup tomorrow on Cougar Sports Saturday, because, if it really is where, hey, the committee knows that Coastal Carolina is 18 in the country and BYU is 13. If that's really what they think of them, and BYU ends up coming out with a 2-touchdown victory or ends up blowing them away, I really just think that it's going to be really hard, and it puts the committee into a difficult position. And so that's why it's a great matchup for BYU, because BYU can say, hey, we took this game. You said that this team was number 18 in the country, and we did this to them. If BYU is able to sit there tomorrow night and be like, hey, we played the game. We did this. We did everything that we could in our power. And you said these guys were a top 25 team, and this is what we did. Like, that's going to put BYU in a really good position going into Tuesday night, in my opinion. Obviously, the College Playoff Committee, they they serve no master other than themselves. And so it'll be interesting to see what they actually end up do and think after tomorrow night's game. But it'll be fun to watch, and we'll have it all covered.
Well, they would tell you, Kyle, they'd say, have a lot of respect for Kyle Ireland. I have a lot of respect for his opinion, but his strength of resume, like it's just that's how they operate. Real quick thought before we go, though. Utah, Oregon State, big game for the Utes. There's maybe questions as to what is Utah playing for. I think all along, once the first 2 weeks of the season got canceled, you kind of thought, okay, this is now an opportunity for a bunch of young guys to develop and get some reps under the belt with no eligibility impacted. So it's kind of just like a little bit of a glorified spring ball, if you will, but still, this is actual games. These matter, and it's a chance for Utah to get some more reps. Real quick thoughts, Utah, Oregon State, how do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I mean, Oregon State, they lost their starting quarterback, probably out for the season, last week's game. Utah, after having a 21-point edge in the first half over Washington, ended up losing that game. Just did not look like they did in the first half during the second 30 minutes of that game against Washington. So Utah's looking for their first win. They're hungry. They're looking for it. I'm really interested. You just scrolled past Ty Jordan there. I just really think that Utah has to go all in on playing their young guys this season. They've got to develop their talent. Ty Jordan should be their starting running back. It's really just a shame that Cam Rising's out for the season, because if they could go all in at every position group to develop their youth, their talent, their secondary is playing and they're super young. Utah's 0-2, right? It's not like they're going to have a special season at this point. So they need to really be looking ahead to 2021, 2022 at this point, and trying to develop some of that talent, because they've had some great recruiting classes in the past few seasons. So to try and build that back up after what they lost in the 2020 NFL draft is really, the focus that they should be having this season. But Oregon State, I mean, that is a winnable game for Utah now that, Oregon State, big upset over the Ducks, but now losing their quarterback really hurts them. So winnable game for Utah, but then again, it's still a tough matchup. Only game on the schedule, I believe, right now from the opposite division that the Utes are in, Pac-12 North, coming to face the Utes. So fun matchup tomorrow night, and Trevor Allen's going to have that game covered for us as well.
Yeah, Utah, I think, gets the win. They'll take down Oregon State in this one. Late night kick, 8:30 p.m. We'll have it covered on the KSL Sports app and KSL.
Pac-12 After Dark, Mitch. Pac-12 After Dark.
Hashtag Pac-12 After Dark. Hashtag BYU Coastal Carolina. Hashtag BYU Utah State basketball. Hashtag it KSL Sports. We're getting it all.
BYU basketball too. Don't forget the other side of the matchup, Mitch. You're going to be covering that game tomorrow. You got a busy day tomorrow. I got football and basketball.
It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it, and enjoy your weekend, Kyle. I know it's going to be busy for you. It'll be busy for me. Everyone out there watching, enjoy your weekend, and make sure to check out KSLSports.com throughout the weekend to stay abreast of everything that's happening in the world of sports. We'll catch you back on Monday here on the KSL Sports front page.